Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Passports edition. My name is Rita Pires, and I'm the head of marketing for Extraordinary Journeys. It's my first time presenting Passports, and I'm very pleased to be here with you tonight. And very delighted to have my dear friend and founder of White Desert, Robyn Woodhead. Robyn is she has a traveler soul, and she has been over 90 countries. I think her passion started when she was around 6 years old and traveled the whole world with her family. Since then, Robyn has been to the North Pole, the South Pole. I believe she was the first South African to do both poles, like a world record. And she is also takes the leadership in promoting sustainability for Antarctica. She has been the chair of YASO in the last year, and sorry, and we're so happy to have Robyn here with us tonight. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Robyn. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Robyn. You are on mute. Sorry, just a technical issue.
There we go. Hi, everybody. And thank you, Rita, for that very kind introduction. It's wonderful to see so many of you have joined, but it would be nice to be able to see your faces and wave hello to everybody from wherever in the world you're dialing in. Rita's quite right. My love of travel was something that was fostered when I was a little girl and has never gone away. In fact, it's become more prolific with age. So yes, I'm a lover of travel, and I collect memories instead of things. And I guess that was how my passion for traveling further afield started. But before I go into more detail about me and how I went about founding White Desert, I thought it might be a good way and a visceral way to show you this otherworldly place that I happen to call my second home, and where I've set up White Desert with my husband. So Alicia's helping me kindly with this slide. So Alicia, if you could just play the video and I can explain a little bit. It's a 2-minute video about what we do, and then talk you all through it and take your questions. If the sound works, let's try. So thanks, Alicia. You can go on to the next slide. I hope that gives you a little bit of the a flavor for what Antarctica is all about. And actually, this next image is my favorite place to visit in Antarctica. I must be honest, no matter how many times I've been there, It's a place called the Ice Waves, which is about a half an hour walk from our first and signature camp, WHICHAWAY. And essentially, it's located on the edge of the continent. And these formations form from the frozen ocean moving towards the continental shelf. So they really are frozen waves. And you can walk along the top of them. And actually later you'll see you can also walk underneath them at certain times of year with obviously the guidance of our expert polar guides walking with you. But it really is, that's my first love in Antarctica. Onto a little bit of a background of how we started the business. Alicia, thank you. Next slide. So it was a husband and wife team. And I think like many things in life, there was a bit of serendipity involved. And there was, as I mentioned already, the inspiration of loving travel anyway. So my husband, who's an Englishman, and as a result loves everything to do with Shackleton and the old world British explorers, decided to do a crazy trip across Antarctica in 2002 actually. And he came back so enamored and so in love with this place that he then managed to convince me that I needed to go to Antarctica with him. So we tried to recreate Shackleton's Nimrod expedition from 1911. And we tried to drive a Land Rover team and a walking team to meet at the South Pole and then to do a full traverse of Antarctica. But Antarctica had other plans for us. So what ended up happening was I ended up sending my Land Rover team home on day 5 of the expedition because I realized we weren't going to make it to the South Pole in time to resupply our other team. And I had my first Antarctic experience was living in isolation almost 20 years before the whole world went into COVID isolation, but in a tent in minus 30 degrees. And it was there that I was inspired about this otherworldly, extraordinary place. And I wondered why only the odd mad scientist and explorer visited it. And maybe it could be a place with a bit more luxury than a tent that we could use to introduce people to the importance of Antarctica as being the front line of climate change, and to have them come back as ambassadors who wanted to conserve it. And then I wrote my entire family into my passion for Antarctica and skied to the North Pole with my dad, my mother, and my 3 siblings. And we became the first family to actually walk to the North Pole. And I became the first South African to go to both. And that very same year we got married. I went to the North Pole, and then we did our first Antarctic trip, which started off with a chef who was the most incredible chef, a gourmet chef from our wedding. And we convinced her on our wedding day to come and drop her normal job and come to the snowy scapes with us. And that's how we started almost 20 years ago now. And from those humble beginnings, it's become quite a big operation. We employ close to 100 staff, 18 nationalities. We've won 11 awards over the years. And I'm sure I can answer lots more questions about how the business has evolved since then, but maybe I'll show you some more visuals first. Alicia, next slide.
Yeah, and just everyone, please ask questions along the way. You can just type it on the chat and then we'll read it loud for Robyn.
Sure. So before I go into the detail of the camp, the glossy side of our business, I think it's important for people to understand how complex logistics in Antarctica really are. So because I think I'm speaking to a mostly American audience, the cost of getting a can of Coke into Antarctica is $32 per can of Coke. That's actually the value once we've transported it in. And this is not how our guests get to Antarctica. I saw a question pop up there, how do you get to Antarctica? We fly our guests on private jets from Cape Town onto a blue ice runway, which takes 5 hours, which is far less, shall we say, exhausting than going on a scientific boat, which is what this is. But this is how we transport a lot of our logistical support to our camps. So you can see in the top left corner there, there's 2 vehicles. So we transport our items there, and then they do a 700-kilometer traverse to get to our first resupply camp at WHICHAWAY. So they really are, quite honestly, the most complex logistics on this planet. Next slide, please, Alicia. So I saw the previous question flash up, how do you get there? If you can see the little image on the tiny plane on the right-hand side of your visual, there is a small private jet. So that's how we fly our passengers in exclusivity and style. Next slide, please, Alicia. Again, another private jet landing in Antarctica. Next slide, please. And this last year, we actually flew in a rather large plane, which is an A340, for those of you who are plane buffs in the audience. And the reason we flew that plane in was because we are the first ever Antarctic operator, both by cruise and air, to use sustainable aviation fuel in Antarctica. And the best way to transport it was actually in the wings of this plane. So that's actually why we bought such a big plane into Antarctica. Rita, I'm seeing lots of questions coming up. Shall I continue or just answer questions as we go?
Continue, and then we can answer.
All right, fantastic. But keep asking the questions. I see them popping up. And next slide, please, Alicia. So to give you a bit of a geography lesson, Antarctica as a continent is bigger than the whole of North America. So it's very big distances you have to travel across Antarctica itself. But looking at this image, this is our signature camp, which is WHICHAWAY camp. And if you can see those tiny little round orbs in this image on the bottom right, those are our luxury pods. We have 7 sleep pods. And then we have a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at the moment of our main area, which is a lounge, a chill out room, a meditation room, a kitchen, bathroom facilities, shower facilities, and a library. And then at the back is our staff tents. Next slide, please. I'll show you the interior now of WHICHAWAY camps. On the top left there is our chill out area lounge, where in the evenings after a fun day out doing adventurous daring do's, or painting a picture of the Antarctic landscape, or taking a photograph, you know, most of our guests get to do as much or as little as they want. Yes, we do have a library, that's correct. And one of the pods is a library, which is, I guess, a love affair, love note from my husband and I to all the guests, because we are Antarctic history buffs and factual buffs. It's all about the geology of Antarctica, the history, climate change, facts, penguins. So you can become fully immersed in everything to do with Antarctica if you're a book nerd. And the picture on the bottom left there is your sleeping pods, which are painted in a dark color because, unbeknownst to a lot of people, Antarctica is 24 hours of sunlight for the 4 months that we operate. So we like to encourage our guests at the end of a long day to be able to pull the blinds closed and have a good night's rest. So that's actually why the colorways of that particular pod are dark. Next slide, please, Lisa.
How many people can you host in this camp? There's a question here about this camp.
So we host 12 guests at a time at WHICHAWAY camp, a maximum of 12 guests. So it really is very exclusive, and quite often the guests are a group of people who know each other, or we actually match make the group, because you know you're getting to know these people quite well over the period of 8 days, which is our standard length of time. But I must be honest, the majority of our groups all end up becoming friends with one another, and because it is quite an intimate environment. Next slide, please.
And Robyn, how do you get there? Another question.
So the start point of all our trips is Cape Town, and all our guests they need to be in Cape Town for 2 days prior to departure in case there's any delays, weather delays, which are very rare, but they can happen. And then it's a 5-hour flight into FANG camp, which I'll be showing you more pictures of. That was the private jet you just saw, is FANG camp. And then we fly our guests in a small hop on a Basler plane, about a 20-minute flight to WHICHAWAY camp, which is on the edge of the continent. And actually just above that ridge, which you can see in the background of this magnificent sauna. So this sauna was launched last year at our new camp. And, you know, we're moving into the more wellness space as well. So we've got a yoga practitioner, we do meditation, and the sauna has been such a successful addition to the camp, because after a fun day out in the cold, you really relish and enjoy sitting in a sauna looking at the most magnificent view, in my opinion. Next slide, please, Alicia. So this is showing you Wolfsfang Camp, and you can see through there, there's a mountain with a strange shape to it. And that is actually Wolfsfang Peak, so named by some Norwegian explorers. And it's a very beautiful series of mountains. And just in front of that, you can see tiny little specks. The perspective in Antarctica is quite uncanny, and the visibility is extraordinary because there is no pollution in Antarctica. Well, they've just discovered microplastics in some of the snow samples on the east of Antarctica, but that's a different subject. But you can see our little Wolfsfang camp there in the middle. Next slide, please, Alicia. And this camp is called Wolfsfang Explorer Camp, and it is a camp more designed for the more adventurous traveler who wants to do much more climbing and ice climbing and experiment a little bit with what it's like to be an explorer, perhaps do fat biking along the runway, learn to drive a skidoo, all sorts of fun activities, but very different activities to the WHICHAWAY camp, which is more about fine dining, beautiful leisurely walks, talks about, climate change and the environment and the old world explorers. So you can see in this camp, the look and feel is much more of a fusion between old world travel explorers and a little bit of modern comforts as well. Next slide, please. And this is our transit lounge, which I've been told by many of our guests is a great highlight. It's only, I'll answer that question about wildlife in a moment. So this ice cave we actually only built it last year, and it's formed from, we put a huge balloon up and then we sprayed snow from the runway onto it. And that's what created this beautiful dome that we've got. And so when our guests arrive, before they fly to WHICHAWAY camp, they can relax after the 5-hour flight in a private jet with a nice comforting cocktail, while their luggage gets moved from the big plane onto the smaller plane, and then they have their 20-minute flight on. So that's and you can have it's a nice selfie opportunity in that throne as well. Feels quite Game of Thrones when you're sitting in there. Next slide, please, Alicia. And this is a very exciting sneak peek of our newest edition that is launching. Very good question. I'll answer that question later. As a South African, I will be able to answer that one. But this image that you're seeing now is Camp Echo, which is actually launching officially this next season. And as you can see, well, I hope you can see, it's very much inspired by the Millennium Falcon and Star Wars and space and adventure travel. And interestingly, space travel and Antarctica are synonymous, and it's always been a link within our business. I think Rita and I'll discuss that a bit more later, and feel free to ask more questions. But this is my husband and I's mastermind, and we're very pleased about this one because it's also fully movable. So we can move it each year to a slightly different view, which we think is quite magical. Next slide, please. So this is the interior of one of the sky pods. And you can see in the sky pods that, they're called sky pods because you can see the sky and the earth. And it's quite a remarkable thing to wake up when it's an overcast day and there's white above your head and white, below your head. So you really feel like you're in space because everything's white. Nothing looks like Earth. So we've designed the interiors, as you can see, with a little bit of the Millennium Falcon fused with, I guess, a modern day luxury retreat. And we even have some photographic visuals taken by an astronaut friend of ours who was the ISS commander, a gentleman called Terry Wirtz, who so loved our camp and was so excited. He gave us usage of all his images for our new Echo camp, which is wonderful. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier about flying within Antarctica itself. This is a Basler plane, which is actually a 1947 aircraft, but it's had $1 million revamp to our specifications. So it's got luxurious leather chairs and everything's been totally rebuilt. But the reason we kept the original frame is it is the most adaptable aeroplane for remote regions. So this one lands on sort of unmanaged runways, unlike our runway WOUFS FANG, which has to be graded every 5 hours before a flight and has a lot of material and time and expertise, these planes can pretty much land anywhere in Antarctica. So that's why we use them. Next slide, please, Alicia. And a big highlight for a lot of our guests, including myself, is always the emperor penguins. So this is an emperor penguin colony that consists of about 28,000 pairs. And then at the start of each year, we run a trip called Early Emperors, and you get to see the chicks as they hatch, and watching the evolution of these chicks over the next 4 months is really quite a beautiful experience. And it is, you know, one of the most magnificent love stories and stories of survival. The fact that these penguins can survive against the odds is incredible. And we are the only tourists who are allowed access to this particular rookery, which is also amazing because the penguins are totally unafraid. They only see us and the odd German scientist from the Alfred Wegener Institute that monitor them and their fecal matter for scientific purposes. Next slide, please.
And tell me something, when is the baby season? Because that story of the baby is fascinating.
So Early Emperors is at the start of November. But, you know, the picture you're looking at on the right here, that one was probably taken mid-December. And then in January, February, they're starting to molt. So they're starting to transition between, you know, being chicks to being full-grown penguins. And that's also a really, really beautiful visual. We recently had a photographer called David Yarrow who came to our camp, and he was there in February, and he got the most incredible photographs of these penguins as they're transitioning, you know, through adolescence between the childhood and the adult penguin. Next slide, please, Alicia.
Would you say is that the best time to go there? Middle November, December?
No, actually, I would say going anytime between November and February. You know, they have different things at different times of year. The penguins are always there, and it's always magnificent, and it's always fascinating. You know, I don't want to tell everybody to go in November because then no one would see the beautiful exchange of the chicks between the father and the mother when the father comes back from feeding, and they do this beautiful call that they can identify amongst 28,000 of which one's their husband and which one's their child, and witnessing that it happens, you know, December, January. So that's another evolution of the love story. So it's always good at the penguin colony, to be quite honest. Another highlight is the geographic South Pole. And at the start of this, I obviously mentioned, I think we've got a lot of people joining us from America. So we're dealing with different time zones, which doesn't happen in America. I mean, in Antarctica. It's the one place where you can choose your time zone. So we happen to have chosen GMT because we're a British company, but at the South Pole Station, they go on American time because they have a NSF, which is the American Science Base. And at the German colony where the penguins are, they go on German time. So it really is the one place in the world where time almost stands still for the duration of your visit, especially when you're at the South Pole. You're standing at the bottom of the planet. Every direction is north. You can walk around the world in 10 steps and you can choose your time zone. It's quite an extraordinary concept when you get there, and you really feel it when you see this funny little pole in the middle of nowhere. It's magic. And it doesn't get old no matter how many times you go there, which I can attest to. Next slide, please. So this is, there's a big presence of scientific work in Antarctica. So this is at the South Pole. This is the American Science Base, NSF, and they do a lot of fascinating scientific work. We've transported a lot of scientists into Antarctica. And I remember sitting next to a scientist once many years ago. He was American and he was a typical scientist. So I had to sort of, you know, get the information out of him. And I said, well, what do you do down in Antarctica? He says, oh, I do neutrino research, ma'am. And I was like, well, what's a neutrino? And he just said, Google it when you go home. It's really complex. It's like, it's about space-time continuum. Yeah. So I was like, okay. So there's some pretty amazing, baffling scientific work that goes on in Antarctica as well, which is also part of the fun. It's intellectually really engaging. Next slide, please, Alicia. So I mentioned earlier, our guests really can do as much or as little as they would like to do. And I think that's one of the privileges of having so many guides. We have a 3-to-1 guide to guest ratio. So we can really divide the group up into a group that wants to go for a hike, a group that wants to go for a short trek, and a group that wants to, do a photography course. So we really can cater for all fitness levels and all interests. Next slide, please, Alicia. So if you see up there on the top left, some of our guests want to take an Antarctic safari and just go for a drive and look around and see if they can see some beautiful mountains and stay warm in the vehicle, and then they can have an alfresco lunch. The staff want to experience the ice waves. So remember, I showed you those ice waves at the start of this. So this is actually inside one of those waves, the picture on the top left. And I have to admit, I cried the first time I went there. And most people do cry, and they just don't care that other people might see them crying, because it's a very overwhelming and transformative experience, because there's no sound. There's just this iridescent blue. The color really is like that. And it's just you and nature, the magnitude of nature. It's very overwhelming. And then on the top right, the more adventurous can do fat biking, hiking, learning to ice climb, building an igloo. So the activities really go on and on and on. And it really is one of the world's last great playgrounds, within reason. It always has to be safe. And our guides are the finest guides, polar guides in the world. They're not afraid to say no if something's not safe. That's another important element. And I think that's it for the presentation part. So now we can go to Rita and questions.
Thank you so much. Let me share some of the questions from the audience here. So,
sure.
Acclimation, when you go to Antarctica, do you have to get used to the climate for a little while when you get there?
Sorry, do you have to acclimatize?
Yeah.
No. So our main camp with the landing strip is just under 2,000 meters. So you don't need to acclimatize. But the South Pole is at 2,800 meters elevation. So it is relatively high altitude, but by that stage, you're normally much more acclimatized. And then WHICHAWAY camp is at sea level. So if you're talking about elevation acclimatizing, there isn't that much acclimatization. And obviously the big adjustment is the temperature acclimatization too. And it normally takes guests a day or two, and then their bodies adjust, and they adjust their layering systems as well. Our staff guide our guests the whole way through the process, way before they come to Antarctica. So we help with organizing the kit list. We can help with buying all the gear, and we make our guests try all the gear on, understand when you use what, because it's a layering system in Antarctica, and help pack everything, ensure that everybody is fully equipped, because obviously the gear for this trip is quite comprehensive. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, thank you. And so on this how to travel there, there's a question on how do you travel from the United States? I guess you have to fly to Cape Town, right?
Yes, so our guests have to get themselves to Cape Town with whatever the routing is at that time of year. I mean, I know, Rita, you probably know more than I do at the moment about the best routing from the States to South Africa. I mean, I know they do some flights out of Newark direct, and they do some flights out of, I'm not actually sure the best routing from the US at the moment, or you have to fly via Europe. I'm actually going to, it's something that I'm sure you guys can help guests with. But yes, the start point is very much Cape Town. And most of our guests actually combine it with a luxury safari, like, with you guys. and they enjoy the you know, the combination of the white desert and the African, you know, terrain. So often our guests do choose to do a combination trip, which is a beautiful way to experience great diversity and you know, to make the most of both continents. But it's really up to, you know, the guest's choice on that. But the flight in starts from Cape Town and it's 5 hours each way.
Yeah, I guess there's some parallel with the immersion that you have in nature on a safari, and although Antarctica is out of this world, it's more like being in the moon. But
yes, no, exactly. There are a lot of similarities between the feeling of going to Antarctica and the feeling of seeing amazing game for the first time. You know, you can see it as many times as you want on a screen, but when you actually experience, you know, an elephant or a rhino or a, you know, a leopard in a tree, it's quite extraordinary. So, and the same experience happens when you see these, you know, this mass of penguins. When you arrive at the colony in Antarctica, your breath is literally taken away because it's cold when you arrive, but then your actual breath is taken away because it is so otherworldly. So I think there are a lot of parallels.
And tell me, in terms of wildlife, what else do you see there?
So there are a lot of little penguins that are generally lost when we see them at our WHICHAWAY or other camps. The Adelie penguins, we call them. So we saw a whole troop of lost penguins, about 10 of them at the start of this last season. They're not meant to be coming that close in, so they're generally lost, and then we kind of try and encourage them to go back in the direction in which they came. But you know, you can't get involved with nature in Antarctica. They take precedent and priority, and so they should. But there's a lot of bird life. You know, we don't have whales where we are because we're about 150 kilometers from the open water. But if you go on the other side of Antarctica on a cruise ship, of course, whales and all that sea life is a big part of it. So we've got skua birds, so a lot of very beautiful bird life. But these are the most resilient birds in the whole world. You know, they can survive anything and they just keep going. So they are quite ruthless creatures and quite fascinating. And they often follow our guests around when they fly because there's not that many people in our part of Antarctica. And then seals. We have a lot of seals in amongst the emperor penguin colony. They're sort of best friends sometimes and hang out near each other. So we do see seals, and that's about it, really. It's about it. And the odd scientist, which can be or cannot be classified as a different species.
I love this question. Is there a braai room?
We are, I know exactly. I saw that question pop up. And as a South African, it breaks my heart to say that there is not a braai room, because we're not permitted, we're not allowed, no one's allowed to have open flame in Antarctica, because the ash from the flame, if it blows away, can melt the snow. And actually that's why the Antarctic Treaty forbids braais in Antarctica, even in the South African base. So sadly we can't braai, but we can use a gas braai. So it's okay.
And yeah, so there's a lot of curiosity. Also, I was thinking, how do you put those camps down out of the season? And there's also a question, how do you get the building materials there?
Very good questions. That's, I think, why I showed you the picture, a little taste of the complexity of the logistics to get into Antarctica. So everything we bring into Antarctica, we have to bring in by ship or aeroplane, and everything within Antarctica has to be 100% removable so that we leave no footprints. So for example, before anyone asked that question, we even fly out the fecal matter from Antarctica every season. So we really do live zero impact on the continent. But yes, the pieces for those pods are we fly those in, and then we actually make them up a bit like a Meccano or Lego set is how we piece them together. But everything is totally removable, and we don't have any permanent cement foundations in any of our, in any of our camps. And we insist on biodegradable products throughout. So it really is a a very low impact camp. But there was recently actually a big article in CNN which explains some of the complexities behind our operations and getting the items in there. So it's a really great question, and one that I'd always shied away from because they are such a big part of what we do, but it's not generally something the guests are interested in. But when I quoted the $32 thing, people were like, wow, that's a really expensive can of Coke. So yes, I hope that answers that one.
In terms of packing, there's some curiosity of weight limit and what to pack and what you provide in camp.
Yes, so again, a great question, because what do I need to do to take part in this holiday, I guess is the big question. So packing is a difficult part of it, but we try to take the difficulty out of every element of what we do. So we send our guests long in advance a very detailed packing list, from the types of socks you should use to the types of boots you should use to the rationale behind the layering systems, the type of jacket you need. We provide the big down puffer jackets you might have seen in polar videos like March of the David Attenborough documentaries. We provide the massive puffer jackets and the massive puffer trousers that people use at the South Pole, and we provide boots called Baffin boots, which you frankly will never wear anywhere else in the world ever again. They take your feet to -78, so they're pretty good boots. But all the rest, we help our guests organize, and we request everybody to pack them into a big duffel bag, so they're soft bags, and we have weights of 25 kilograms. And then for hand luggage is 10 to 15 kilograms, because a lot of our guests bring photographic big lenses and all of that equipment with them.
Yeah, so we have a question about the bathroom. Here's where do you go to the bathroom while on your expedition?
So how did I go to the bathroom on my expedition? Or how will you go to the bathroom on your luxury holiday? I think they're two very different, they're two very different answers. So I think I touched on it in the beginning. When you're an explorer and you're walking, you're generally dragging a sled behind you. So you stop, and if there's a rocky area, you try and do your number one on the rocky area. But your number two, you genuinely have to put in a bag, a biodegradable bag, back into your sled, and then you have to drag your own fecal matter around. So that's not what you have to do when you come with us. We have bathrooms that are actually designed, which are exactly the same as the ones they use in space. So they have a suction system, but when some weight goes onto them, they have a little suction system and they seal them, and then we fly them out, which is exactly the same way as astronauts deal with their fecal matter. So the packaging is quite expensive, but it's biodegradable and very safe. So you have a beautiful toilet that you can sit on, is the answer, in your nice own private pod. And there are lovely showers that you can use, which are solar powered, in the bathing pods as well. So we tend to discourage people from having overly long showers, because we have to pump out our own water and heat it through solar. And we try to encourage people to be conscious of their impact when they're there. But yes, you can have a glorious shower every day if that's what you would like to do.
What is the average stay of guests in camp? I don't know if actually there's several departures there.
We have several. We have many different types of trips. So we have a thing called the Greatest Day, which is literally a day trip to Antarctica. So people fly in 5 hours. They spend approximately 4 or 5 hours on the ground in Antarctica, just getting a taste for it at the FANG camp, and then they fly back home. And then we have a trip that we're launching this year, which is called the Antarctic Summit Trip, and that is staying at FANG. And again, that's for the more adventurous traveler. That is 6 days long. But our signature trips are 8 days long. And in those signature trips, we either do just emperors, so the emperor penguin colonies, or we do emperor penguins and South Pole, because as I mentioned earlier, Antarctica is a massive place, and you know, getting around it is not that easy. So it takes a bit of time. So the Emperors and South Pole trip, the reason we do 8 days is because we may do the South Pole at the start of the trip when the weather's good in that region, and then we'll do the Emperor Penguins later when it's good in that region as well. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And within your camps, do you combine several camps or no?
No, we tend not to. So we will next year, you know, we'll be operating a group at Echo Camp, a group at WHICHAWAY Camp, and then WOUFS Camp will be our interim camp between the two. So we tend to operate two separate groups totally independently of each other, and we time their visits to the South Pole and the Emperors accordingly.
Good. And in terms of the ratio guest guide, what is the ratio that you offer? And you kind of
1 to 3. Yeah, so 1 to 3, and our guides really are, they're very humble, but they are extremely accomplished. So if we have a guest who wants to do, you know, polar photography, all of our guides are exceptional polar photographers. In fact, most of the images you saw at the start of this were taken by our high mountain guides. So they really are amazing photographers, amazing guides, interesting people. So our guests often become quite good friends with our guides as well. Also, I think a lot of our guests surrender when they come to Antarctica because it is so otherworldly that they sort of let the guides help them put their boots on in the morning and help them pack their bags. And, you know, you're on a holiday. So these people, you know, they look after you. So they become your friends. So yes, the guide to client ratio is really great. So you can essentially do, you know, as many activities or as few activities as you want to.
And I would like to add on that something you told me the other day, that clients can dictate their schedule because there's no night, so you can do activities 24/7.
Yes, we do have some guests that are so overexcited about being in the land of the midnight sun that they just want to do activities all the time. But we do recommend that they get some rest, because then sort of come day 4 or 5, their batteries just run out and they just can't keep going. And that might be the day that they fly to the South Pole. So yes, you can. Our guides are super fit. They're sort of like ever-ready, super-powered batteries, and they would love to wake up at 3 in the morning because the light's magnificent, to photograph a plane coming in on the runway, if that's your passion. So they are wonderful people, all of them, and very, very flexible. Yes.
Amazing. And on the photo side, you're talking about pictures. I have a question here from Paul. How do you photo in the cold weather with freezing technology?
Yeah, again, it's a great question, and I must qualify the fact that I'm not a professional photographer by any stretch of the imagination, but all the photographers that we've had come into Antarctica, you know, the key is temperature management of your product. So, for example, keeping your batteries warm inside your Gore-Tex jacket is number one. Keeping them in a separate little bag, often with a heat patch, just so they can't get cold while you're out and about throughout the day. The reason you do that is your batteries will last longer if you're keeping them warm and close to your body. The lenses tend to be absolutely fine, but if you're transitioning inside, outside all the time, they can get a bit misted up. But it's a photographer's dream, Antarctica, you know, it really is. And that's why we've hosted so many photographers on groups, as individuals. So it is a place where you really can take breathtaking photographs. And if it was that hard, no one would do it. So no, it's totally doable. We just need to give you a bit of guidance, and we can actually put you in touch with one of our photographers if you're a keen photographer, and they will give you some free advice on take this, don't take that, use this lens for this light. So we're quite used to providing that on-hand advice for photographers.
Eleanor is saying there are so many cruise companies operating in Antarctica, on the peninsula. Why do you think there aren't other operators doing the same sort of land-based flying operation?
In a short sentence, because it's so difficult to operate in the interior of Antarctica. Yes, I mean, as I think Rita mentioned at the start, I've been a member of IATO, which is for 17 years since we started. And IATO is the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators. So what that means is all the cruise operators that operate in Antarctica and ourselves, we all sit around a table, literally like the United Nations, once a year, and we create the laws and regulations, and just recently climate change pledges that we are all going to be governed by. So although we are competitors on one level, we actually all work very well together. And so, you know, the short answer to that is it's easier to get to the peninsula by a boat than it is to have the logistics to support an inland interior operation. That's why.
So there's a few more questions. I'm still going to go through them. Do you have to get certified to build or have accommodation spots in Antarctica? Robyn, you froze.
I'm part of that. Oh, do you have to get certified to build a camp in Antarctica? Okay, great question. Yes, you do. As I mentioned in the last question about IATO, overarching IATO is a thing called the Antarctic Treaty, which is one of the rare examples of governmental collaboration for the greater good. So what the Antarctic Treaty is, and it's still under signature, is it means that Antarctica is only for the use of responsible, sustainable tourism and scientific work, and can only be for peaceful accord. So there's no mining allowed in Antarctica, the short answer. So every year that we operate, a very complex set of environmental impact assessments with the British government, because we're a British company, we are permitted each year by the British government. So it's about a sort of 1,500 page environmental impact assessment on every element of what we do. So yes, you have to be certified to operate in Antarctica, very much so.
Since we're talking about sustainability, I know it has been a priority for White Desert since you started, and you've been carbon neutral from the start. What is the latest innovation at White Desert in terms of sustainability?
Yeah, we're always trying to innovate and trying to adopt the latest technologies as they become available. You know, we're all limited at the moment globally, no matter how much we want to do, by what is available to us to do. So we are trying to do all we can. As I mentioned earlier, we use sustainable aviation fuel. We use wind and solar power at our camps. We offset what we can't reduce, because we don't have the technologies yet. But what I do know is the sustainable aviation fuel that we are bringing across our fleet over the next 3 years is reducing our carbon by 80%. So that's really, really massive. And wherever we can, we are now using the sustainable fuel in our tracked vehicles across our supply chain as well. And, you know, we've done things like, you know, the reducing plastics became trendy a few years ago. We've never taken plastics into Antarctica. So we take all the packaging of all our products. We've been doing that for 17 years because everything in Antarctica is about weight. So, you know, we recycle everything. We don't bring in plastics. We don't, you know, single-use plastics are out. So we try and, you know, reduce wherever we can. But for me, a big part of what we do is to try and uplift the whole community and lead by example. So that's part of why I was, you know, spearheading the climate change work within IATO. And just this year, last month, actually, we unanimously voted in for the entire cruise industry to invest in sustainable fuels, to use any new technologies that come available, and to offset the rest. But, you know, some really amazing, groundbreaking work is being done in that area, because we all know that we want to have as light a footprint in Antarctica as we possibly can, and to try and be an example to other governments and countries of how to do things with minimal impact.
Amazing. So I would like to talk about the new camp Echo. We don't have much more time, but 8 minutes left. Tell me a little bit more about the space, the Star Trek inspiration. I also have someone here at Corney asking about the pods and how dark are they, if the windows are.
Oh, yes, great question, because I'd explained at WHICHAWAY that we have the interiors quite dark and we have dark curtains. So you're quite right with that question, Corney, to ask about the these massive sky pod windows. You know, how do you sleep with so much light? It's a good question. We actually have magnetic window blinds that you can essentially throw them at the windows and it blacks out the blinds, which is pretty cool and spacey. So no, they're very much blacked out, darkened areas, and you can turn your lights off as well. But all our guests get earplugs and eye blinds as well, because the noise of the wind on a stormy night in Antarctica, you don't really hear them in the pods, but you know, I like to sleep with zero sound. So I'm assuming other people want the opportunity to do the same. But the real inspiration behind Camp Echo actually started when we had a guy called Buzz Aldrin, and this is his this is a picture of the moon that he signed for me many years ago that I keep behind my desk. And he came to our camp in Antarctica and he actually said, you know, this place reminds me of the moon, and it's such an otherworldly place. You really should, you know, bring astronauts here, make it more spacey, because it is so similar to the moon, but it's on this planet, and you know, we should be doing some lunar testing here. And so we have done, you know, some of that work. And since Buzz's inspiration, we had that guy that I mentioned who's donated some of his images from space, his favorite images of Antarctica from space, from the International Space Station, in the bathrooms at Camp Echo, which is such a privilege. And you know, we're quite popular with the astronauts, so we thought, let's make this this connection between otherworldly experience and Antarctica real in Camp Echo. So we tried to combine spacey, space age design, 1970s interpretation of space age design with luxury. So that was very much the inspiration behind Camp Echo.
Lovely. Is there any age limit for your guests?
Upper or lower? So we have an age limit on the lower side. We don't take under 12-year-olds to the South Pole, just because of the inability to express clearly when they're really cold, in a cold environment with lots of gloves on at the South Pole. It can get quite cold. So we have that age limit for just the South Pole part of the trip. And in terms of an upper age limit, we don't have one, but we do make all our guests do very comprehensive medical forms where they have to, you know, have a full medical with the doctor, and we have to have full disclosure in confidence about any medical issues. So we have had the occasion where we've had to turn away the odd client. I remember a wonderful old lady of 102 who wanted to come. And when I asked her about her insurance, she said, "Oh no, I don't need insurance. I'm happy to die out there." And I politely said to her, "You may be, darling, but I'm not. I don't have a death on my hands at my camp, and I'm not planning on it. So no thanks." So the short answer is no.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if there's anything else you would like to share that we haven't said.
I don't think so. I've been talking a lot. I'm sorry no one else got the chance to talk apart from me, but I hope you've all found it interesting and insightful. And I hope I've given you a little bit of a flavor for this place that I am still, after nearly 20 years, in love with. It is my passion. It is my my second home. My children fell in love with it earlier this year. And I think it's important for your children to understand, you know, Visit Mom at Work Day was a bit more complex than most parents, but I'm hoping that I'm helping, you know, show people this incredible place to, you know, keep it pristine. And it really is a magnificent place that you can only truly understand and appreciate by stepping foot, you know, in the continent. So I hope I've inspired some of you. And otherwise, I hope I've entertained you in your lunch hour. And it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much for inviting me, Rita.
Thank you so much, Robyn. It was such a pleasure to have you here today and sharing all your exciting stories and beautiful camps. Yeah, I think we'll leave dreaming about going to Antarctica. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. I hope to meet you all soon.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And yeah, just send questions even later on. You have our contact to send off your questions, and we'll make sure we answer to all of them.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.